Call to order the February 13th meeting of the Conestoga Valley Board of School Directors. The board welcomes those in attendance as well as those joining us online. So will you please join me with the pledge to the flag?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Martin, can we please have an attendance report?
6 members present tonight. Mr. Benigno, Dr. Martin, and Ms. Trowbridge are absent.
Well, we have a quorum. Also in attendance, the superintendent and the administrative cabinet. This is our work session, one of 2 meetings per month in which we receive most of the informational presentations as well as discuss and deliberate future decisions. There may, and there are, some action voting items required on timely issues or to meet time constraint guidelines. Our meetings observe the requirements of the school code, legislative directives, the original Act 48 Sunshine Law, all subsequent amendments, judicial rulings, applicable regulations, and our district policies to the best of our understanding and ability. All agendas and related public documents are posted on the district website. Are there any changes, corrections, additions, or deletions to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstention? If not, the agenda is accepted. We'll start with the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a thank you to Mr. Dillman, who came up with the idea to invite CTC students to the new Smoketown. And then a follow-up thank you to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Peters, and the principal over at Brownstown CTC, Mrs. Gettle. They are going to organize a tour for the students on Wednesday, February 22nd.
Great.
So thank you, sir and gentlemen, for making that happen. That's all for tonight, Madam President.
Are there any board comments on district activities?
Well, I guess I was going to mention Leola Fun Night. Can I mention that now?
Sure, if you want.
So Leola had their fun night, and it was incredibly well attended, which was super cool for the Leola community. So big, in fact, they had to stagger the pizza serving because they couldn't fit everybody in the cafeteria in one shot.
Wow.
So to see that the community kind of bounce back from that from attendance thing was really, really, really cool to see. A lot of smiling faces, fun activities for the kids. It was just a really great night.
Oh, great.
So kudos to Principal Aloisa, and Dr. Koza was there as well, and it was just really cool to see that piece of it. So thank you guys.
It's great to know that we have that much parent participation when we're going to schools.
Just got to work on that PTO.
Are there any comments from the public at this point in the meeting on items on the agenda? If not, we'll get right on to our action discussion items, starting with the change orders from Smoketown Elementary.
Thank you very much. Today we have 3 items on the agenda, and the GC and the EC ones actually go together. So we'll start with the GC ones. There are 2 different items in the GC ones that relate to the EC item. So if you recall, possibly at the middle school, there was an under carpet wiring system. So we're switching that system out at the new Smoketown, and we're putting in an under slab, a standard system. So the change order on the line there is for cutting and patching of the slab there. There's a corresponding credit in the electrical one to switching from that specialty systems to a typical install. And then the second item on this change order and also on the electrical change order is we had a pre-install meeting regarding door hardware and access control, and we found some redundancies in power supplies and some other things. So we actually have a credit from both contracts related to those items. So that's on the GC and the EC. So the total add for the GC was almost $14,000, and the credit from the EC is like $13,006. So it's about a wash between the GC and the EC change orders. And then the MC one, this is the second change order for mechanical on this project. The first one, if you recall, was also related to prepayment for the train system. This one is for the train controls And so with the district purchasing that, you have an almost $30,000 credit to the contract on that as well. So those are the three change orders for this evening. Are there any questions on those?
If not, that will be on the consent agenda next week.
Okay.
Is that everything?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Athletic department.
Mrs. Henry.
Hello, good evening, everybody. All right, so I made minor tweaks to this presentation from last year, so most of that is informational that I put out for you to just review. There's only a couple of slides that I really want to refer to. The first one is our participation rates, I believe, is participation rates. I think it's another 5 or 6 slides, maybe. So, yep, there we go. So last year's participation rates, as you can see, we still have a pretty healthy participation rate. The middle school participation rate was up from last year. The high school participation rate was slightly down. However, the 2 and 3 sport athletes increased. So I thought that was interesting. And we do have, as you can see, many 2 and 3 sport athletes, thank goodness, because without those kids that are playing more than one sport, we may not be able to field JV teams and varsity teams. So we're glad that the kids are more well-rounded and not just specializing in one sport, as is the trend today. And then GPAs, I wanted to point this out. They continue to be strong. It's right around the same average as last year. I'm just so proud every time I look these up and I put them down on paper. It just makes me even more proud to see how well all of these student athletes do with budgeting their time and knowing what's important. And this year at our what do we call it? The college commitment ceremony, we had 14 student athletes, and the average GPA of those 14 was about a 3.4, 3.5. So it's right in line with the average GPA of the teams. So again, something to be very proud of. And there they are. And then, the athletic budget comparison. So I put it on 2 slides. I wanted to, a couple of the categories I combined the last few years. This time I separated them to go by line item. So, review, I know that you already did review, but we can look at these 2 slides and then let me know if you have any questions.
The 10,600 for goals, what goals?
Soccer goals and field hockey goals.
Okay.
So the field hockey goals, the set that we're replacing is a set that we have been continually getting welded. They continue to break, then we weld them, and they break, and we weld them, and they're finally to a point where they're not safe to be using.
Okay.
And then the soccer goals, our former groundskeeper, he usually would keep me abreast of things that needed to be replaced. He said that the goals that we're using for the middle school are too light. When the referees would come and they would check the equipment, they would check the steadiness of those goals. And if they're too light, they can actually fall during play. So we need to get a heavier set that's more used for games. Even though we have sandbags and we have things in place trying to keep them from falling, but they're too light. So we need to get more of a game goal set.
This is Henry, the contracted professional services isn't a big number, but I see it decreased about 40%. What was that change?
Really, the change is moving something that used to be in contracted professional services is now considered something else. So it's now considered other professional services.
Okay.
And I believe the other professional services went up a little bit because of that, but also because, it's just a little bit there. But also because the athletic training services, so if when COVID hit and, you know, people have to quarantine, I thought, well, what am I gonna do if both my trainers are sick at the same time? Or if one has COVID and the other one is exposed, we're going to need somebody to cover. So we have just kind of a backup plan there, and the athletic training services went up from $35 an hour to $45 an hour. So that's why that's increased there a little bit. But it doesn't look like that's where the contracted professional services would have gone. So I'm trying to remember where they would have gone. Could you go back to the first slide there, Dr. Z? Special supplies and furniture, video reconditioning, tournaments, rentals. Oh, no, I know what it was. It was a one-time charge for something that we used for this year, and now we don't have that charge anymore. That's what that was, yeah. I have all my thank yous. There's probably another slide or two I could add. And I thought that this was a pretty neat slide to see. We have 4 athletes that were named All-State, so 2 last spring and 2 this fall. Don't know of any yet for the winter, as those seasons are still going on, and those won't be named for another month or so. But we still have our winter and our spring seasons for this year. So. The girls are kicking butt.
Good.
Any other questions?
The part of this that pleases me the most is the multi-sport athletes. I know several years back, PIAA was concerned that there was too much specialization going on at too young an age. And they had trouble convincing local school districts and coaches not to encourage that, but it's really good to see that a healthier perspective is
I
there.
agree. And our coaches do a great job of encouraging it and working with the student athletes and their other coaches with off-season training and things like that. And it's great. And when we interview prospective coaches, we always ask, what is your philosophy on multi-sport athletes? And that's just a standard question in our
That's
interview
healthier for them,
questions.
too,
It
when
is,
they're just
yeah.
developing like that.
Yeah.
Even though they may be a star athlete, that makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a trend when it comes to the 2s and 3s? Like, are there 2 that are more common that are played versus some of the other ones? I imagine there would be.
Yes, there are. If usually the cross-country track and field, you know, if you're running cross-country, you're also going to run track and field. A lot of times for girls, it would be like field hockey, lacrosse. Boys might be, I mean, it's across the board really. Like it could be football, track and field, it could be football, baseball, it could be football, lacrosse. Basketball, track and field. I mean, there's a mix, but that's typically what we're
Either
seeing.
way, it's a lot of running.
That's right.
It used to be common for all football players to automatically go on the track team.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could do a number of different things depending on what position they play, right? So they're a linebacker, they're probably throwing.
And
If
the complementary skills.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. Mm-hmm.
That's good to see, not to mention the GPAs are good to see.
The GPAs are great.
Thank
so.
you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Dave,
Yes,
you have
policy
an
review.
explanation to do about
Yep.
policy?
I want to thank the board for allowing us to contract with PSBA to do a total review of all of our policies. Marilyn has worked closely with the PSBA reps, and they have just finished the 400 series. We call it the 400 series. Everybody else in Pennsylvania calls it the 300 series. So we're changing it to the 300. Back in the day, there used to be a 300, a 400, and 500, and they were all personnel. It was support personnel, professional personnel, and administrative personnel. And it was really a duplication of each one of the policies. So PSBA combined them, put them into the 300s, we combined them and put them into the 400s. So we've changed them all to the 300s, that's minor. But what we're gonna look at is develop the board committee, and will involve CVEA and appropriate personnel and administrators to get together and take a look at the 300s. So we're gonna redo the 300s. And then while we're doing that, PSBA is gonna start working on our zeros. And then we'll do the zeros in the same format and just go through the 100s, 200s, 700s and 800s
900s.
and 900s as we move forward. So it's gonna take time. Probably, I'm guessing about a year, because it took them, Marilyn, I'm guessing 2 months, do the 300s for us. Zeros will be a little bit quicker because there's not as many, but it'll probably take at least a good year for us to finish up. They've also done the administrative regs for us as well. So that's where we are right now. So we will start next month with the first reading of those 300s.
And just to get this clear to everyone too, because evidently I was a little confused with it. I had asked Mr. Gensel to head up a group to go over the
Triple zeros.
triple zeros, because there is so much in there that's specific to us. Excuse me, that's voluntary. I was under the impression that we also had a policy committee, which we didn't. What we had done before, which is what I thought we did, we simply appointed someone as needed whenever the policy was being changed. It needed some board input on the front end. So that's probably what we'll do, and I've asked Mr. Benigno if he would do that.
Okay.
Just to be available when they needed it, because when it comes to personnel, we basically need to review that with CVEA.
Sure.
And to make sure it's in line with the collective bargaining agreement. Some of the others are so internal that they really don't affect the board. So we'll have one person on a sort of on-call basis when they need them, and Mr. Gensel will take care of going over, get a couple of people with him to go over a review of how we run our meetings. So I finally got that straightened out in my head. Our next item is Dr. Mann.
Good evening, everyone. What I have here is a contract for a temporary assistant principal to help at the high school with Mr. John Savage leaving. We're fortunate enough to find one. These folks are a hot commodity, evidently, out there. Those of you that are maybe new to the board, but maybe not new to the district, may recognize the name. Colleen Hovanik was the principal at Fritz for a number of years before retiring. So I'm looking for a motion to approve her so that she can begin on Wednesday the 15th.
Excellent choice of personnel. Any concerns or questions? If not, I'll take a motion to approve this contract.
Make a motion to approve the contract.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye.
Great,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Please tell her we're glad to see her back.
Yeah, just excited that perhaps, probably juniors and seniors would have been at Fritz.
You're right, yeah, they would have.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's gonna
She'll see them
reconnect.
again.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Kozer, we have a contract for some training.
Yep, so good evening. This is our proposal to work with SOSL and the Penn Literacy Network to provide targeting professional learning for our instructional paraprofessionals next year. You know, we have our pot of ESSER money that we are continuing to develop our final spending plans for. And so this is an opportunity that we have to get our paras who are on the front lines delivering those Tier 3 math and literacy interventions every day, really targeted training. So there will be professional learning sessions, but what we love about this model is there's also on-site coaching and mentoring. So the Penn Literacy Network trainers will be in classrooms watching, observing, and providing direct feedback to our paras. So it's a really nice partnership opportunity with SOSL to bring this targeted training. They approached us last year And we just, with the turnover in staff and the staffing situation we had last year, we asked them just to pause, give us some time to see what happens with staffing. And so this year we've been able to really maintain a consistent team of paraprofessionals. We had some changes here and there, but not nearly what we saw last year. So we feel confident that this is a good time to begin this opportunity over the summer and into next school year.
You anticipated my question, which was going to be how stable is this employee pool? Is this something that we will have to, as that employee pool changes, repeat every now and then?
So our hope would be that our reading specialists and our math specialists get to see how Penn Literacy Network is running some of these sessions. It wouldn't be something necessarily that we would be able to sustain long-term, but our own people could take portions of it and provide some of the professional learning moving forward.
Okay, great. This is for the consent agenda for next week. Any other questions?
Dr. Kozer, just out of curiosity, how do we evaluate the effectiveness of a program like this?
So we will use staff feedback as the number one source. We have evaluation forms that they fill out anytime they go through a professional learning opportunity. So there will be one after the intensive sessions in August, and then we will probably do a mid-year and an end of year. Just to rate not only their input on the effectiveness, but also their changes in understanding of the science of reading and some of those practices. But in addition, one of the biggest ways is we'll see the implementation of those practices. So our math specialists and reading specialists are working with our paras on a regular basis. They're observing and providing feedback on those strategies. So it would be the observation piece of our team members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Dr. Z, you are going to explain to us these monies that the IU passes through.
And that's exactly what it is. It's normally a consent agenda, but because we got the information late from the IU, and with a quicker turnaround, we have to make it an action item tonight. We're receiving $821,000 and some change, and that passes through to the IU to support our students that are being supported by the IU.
Any questions? And of course, the IU got the information late too.
Right, correct.
Starts at the course. I will entertain a motion to approve these funds.
Motion to approve the funds.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge? Aye. Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye. Mrs. Hunsinger. You have the next two items, both of which are action items.
Yes, they're both action items and they're both related to each other. So, since 2017, Portnoy Law Associates has been collecting our delinquent real estate taxes, and we've had no problems with their services. However, back in the early part of January, I received an email that they, and I guess all of their vendors received the same email stating that they had a service disruption with their network and that they had to suspend their operations, email and call center. So service interruption, that does happen. Nothing was utterly alarming about it. But about 14 days later, I came to find out that their offices had actually been closed. When you called the call center, the message was that offices are closed, the call center is closed. There was no communication about it, this issue having been elevated to that level. I did reach out to my contact there and asked several questions. Communication was not direct or clear, and some of my questions were not answered. So I worked with them, and they said that they would be willing to release us from their contract. Back in November, we just approved a 2-year contract with them, or addendum to continue the contract for 2 years. So they are willing to release us for the, starting January 1 of this year, and that would be collections for the 2022 delinquents that were just turned over. So they would continue to collect any of our outstanding delinquents from 2021 and prior. And then the next step is I contacted the Lancaster County Tax Claim Bureau, and they have been fantastic. We used to have them collect our delinquents previously. works out very well with them. They were willing to take us on, even though this was kind of late in the process for them to accept our delinquents, but they're working with us, and I have no hesitation moving forward. So I would ask for your approval this evening. As far as costs go, there is no additional or cost to the school district. However, what I will say is there are not as many fees that are assessed by the Tax Claim Bureau as there were with Portnoy. So it's going to be more beneficial and helpful to some of the taxpayers who are struggling to get their taxes paid. Any questions?
I know we were always pleased with Portnoy, the way they handled these issues. Is there anything that we're losing in this change, any service that we, our taxpayers, lose?
One of the reasons we went to Portnoy was because it did help to increase our cash flow, the collection of those delinquents, so that we might be losing. But again, with inflation and other economic struggles, I think we're helping our taxpayers right now. But again, I was pleased with them. It was just the lack of the communication, lack of clarity and transparency, and concerned about our taxpayers' information and money.
Can we make this one vote, or do you think we have to separate them?
You can go ahead and approve both as presented.
Both of them.
You can.
And I just want to mention one other item that was of concern. We did not receive payment from Portnoy for about 4 to 5 weeks. So that was one area of concern, that they had our taxpayer money. Like, tell me how you're safeguarding it.
Are we all straightened out with that now?
I'm sorry?
Are we all up?
No, I don't think so yet.
Still
We
behind.
received a payment of $400, and then late last week, another one of $4,000. We should be receiving typically more, but with our operations closed, nothing was being processed.
Do we have any way of finding out what's still out there?
Yeah, I just need to get reports from them. They're coming back up online slowly, so, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
They'll work well with us.
Okay. I'm going to put these two items together, items G and H, that cancel one contract and change our collection agency. Somebody make that motion.
Unless we just say approval of both items as presented. All right, then we approve both items as presented.
Second.
That's why they have letters, so you can identify them.
Who was the second?
Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Kapka? Aye. Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge? Aye. Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, I've get this down this list pretty quickly. Item I, Dr. Z, would you like to explain this one?
You bet. As we went and hired our new solicitor effective January 1st, we also discussed the ongoing legal concerns that we have with the new middle school, and we opted to continue to use Barley Snyder as the ad hoc counsel for that new middle school and any associated construction costs moving forward. This is a formal approval for that agreement.
Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve Barley Snyder's appointment for the middle school.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge? Aye. Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye. Thank you. Mr. Appleby. Some of our tech equipment.
There you go. Good evening, board. First item up for discussion action is new networking equipment. This is specifically for the new Smoketown construction project, as well as a pretty decent lift of equipment at the high school. We are planning on doing the switches, the wireless APs, and the UPSs all through subsidy of E-rate funding. So what is E-rate? E-rate is a federal pot of money that comes off of the Universal Services Access Charge, which pretty much anybody that buys internet, if you were to look at your bill, you're gonna see a USAC charge. It's about 25%. It's been sitting there for a number of years. So it's basically this giant pool of federal tax money that comes in, And it's basically earmarked for the E-rate program, which allows libraries and public schools to upgrade and maintain and do services. We actually use E-rate for both the category 1 and 2. Category 1 is our connected services, so we use that to subsidize our Comcast WAN connectivity for all the elementaries and the service building back to the main campus. Category 2 is physical networking equipment. So we're looking to purchase all of the new equipment for Smoketown, as well as replacing some of the most outdated switches at the high school. If any of you have a high schooler who was here at the beginning of school, knew that we ran into some networking issues largely related to new iPads, old switches, not liking to play well. So we decided this year we're gonna roll it in. So there's a lot of numbers, and I don't wanna bore people or get your heads hurting, but the two factors are national school lunch data factors into a percentage, and then our total student enrollment factors into the overall amount of money that we have, and then it's split over 5 years, and they've changed all the rules since I started here in 2019. But suffice it to say, this past year we were required to update national school lunch data, but we didn't have to touch our enrollment numbers, so technically we still have a lot more money than we did or would, but our percentage actually changed. So we are actually at 80% discount. So what that means, the district has to fork over 20%, the federal government allows me to use 80%. It's a pretty decent split. The last time I did this for the new middle school was a 50%. And that was right because we had updated the numbers pre-COVID. So you have the numbers in front of you. We did a PEPA mini bid, so that means I had vendors under the Unified Grant Guidelines, so coming in and submitted on the request. We evaluated. There's the recommendations for the 3 categories. Just so you know, I have the FF&E funding, which will be for New Smoketown, as well as I already have pre-budgeted for the high school equipment under operational budget, so that's all been accounted for. I need the board to approve us to basically go ahead and move, so then I can do the arduous task of filling out all the contract information and submitting for the actual federal funding, which is due the first week of March. So I don't like waiting. The longer you wait, the longer it takes the government to give you your money. Surprise, surprise. So there's the numbers. That were totals about $431,000 worth of equipment. It's a decent amount of equipment. The last time we did it was about $380,000 for the new middle school, and that was just one building. So USAC will cover $345,000. The district's $86,000. So kind of a lot for little. Are there any questions?
I have a feeling they're not sure what it is they want to ask, but they want to ask it.
Is it actually real? Yes, it is. It's just.
No, I was thinking, do we want to throw in some other outlets at this 80-20% rate? I mean,
So, yes.
This is like gathering all your friends because there's a sale.
Right.
Well, so, yes, that wouldn't be a bad idea. However, there are certain conditions. One being that when you purchase the equipment, the federal government basically wants you to have it in use within a year.
Okay.
So that's already a lot of equipment for my team to be installing. The other side is based on that student enrollment numbers, we get a 5-year window for a pot of money.
Okay.
We're gonna be getting real close to the end of the pot of money. I don't actually think when we get to Leola, we're gonna have enough to fully cover it. So some of that heavier costs will come out of the FF&E.
Okay.
But since Brownstown was recently done, that's up to date. The new middle school's all brand new equipment. The high school's kind of a mixed bag. And Fritz is fairly up to date as well. And we tend to take what might still be good, just not as brand new, and we reallocate as necessary. There's a lot of rules around E-rate money. It's kind of funny. Well, it used to be you have to designate which percentage is going to which building. Just this year, they said, we don't care. So, yeah. So it's just trying to make sure I don't blow through the entire budget because we still have 3 years left. So just keeping that kind of in there. Had not actually originally planned on doing the high school, but when I consulted with my team and the start of the school year, kind of the consensus was if we could replace all the oldest series of switches, which is 26 of them, that would be a huge benefit. So we threw it in and opted for it. So does that answer your question? I know
I understand you said that the government actually lessened its requirements.
Yes, well, and I
They
asked.
usually like to get loads of reports if they read them or not.
And catch up.
Well, so they did certain rules during COVID, like that we didn't have to report national school lunch data, you could just carry over. And then when they released the new requirements, they were like, yes, you must update your national school lunch data, which is gonna impact your overall percentage. But they did not expect us to change our student tuition numbers, which impacts the overall amount of budget. And I asked 3 different people, I said, this doesn't make sense. And the answer I got was, it's kind of a hold harmless situation. They know the situation. I'm like, okay, federal government, let's just, yeah.
Take it and don't ask.
Yeah, so, yeah, take the 80% and don't worry about taking, because if, I did the math, if we actually updated to current numbers just because of where the numbers were, we'd lose like about 200,000 in the budget. So it's the numbers, per student rate is kind of weird, so I'm not gonna mess with a good thing.
Don't ask, don't tell.
When's the next time we'll have to update those numbers?
It depends on when USAC decides to change it, because they give you a 5-year window, and so far in that 2 years of that, they've different ones, so they have more money than they know what to do with right now because of a lot of the ESSER has taken some of that lift, so they're actually lessening the rules because they're sitting on too much money, so. Yeah, I know.
We'll
Does this-
spend it.
Well, and you've been charging 25%, which is their maximum allotment for the last I don't know how many years, and people keep buying internet, funny enough, so.
Does this program cover equipment only, or would it cover installation as well?
So, yes and no.
So, and the only reason I ask is if it's a resource issue of getting everything installed,
Mhm.
can we use the funds at the 80% discount for installation resources?
So here's kind of why I've been utilizing them for construction projects, is because we have certain elements of the managed cabling, the fiber and the ethernet, that's part and parcel with typically your electrical contractor. That would be the managed services piece that you could do. When you start talking about that, they're like everybody else, and then it's where the labor rules come in and everything else, and it's just easier to buy equipment, honestly, and let that labor component sit. I can spend the whole budget on services alone, so, yeah. I should be coming to you at some point, I'll just make your head explode later, but we're actually reevaluating the category 1 side of E-rate with the IU to try to figure out a way to actually manage our own fiber between all the buildings, so we can increase speeds and not have to pay Comcast $80-some thousand a year. So, they're looking at that, cause the IU is actually building a huge dark fiber net with all of the school districts all the way up to Lebanon, and they have a giant ring that we're all supported on, which has been fantastic, and they're branching all the way up to Berks now, so. Yeah, we got lots of resources on that, so. I just need to know if you'll let me move forward on this.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the E-rate mini bid.
So moved.
Second.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hirsch?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Capta?
Aye.
Mr. Talley? Mrs. Brown?
Aye.
Alright, the last one is I gotta clean up, so we're required to bring to your attention that we submitted out for bids for our old, used, recycled, resale technology. That typically comprises a lot of the old laptops that are off lease that have been replaced now at this point by iPads. That's usually a big one. I don't wanna get into the nuances of technology resale, but suffice it to say, in the last few years, you see these big numbers, you have them pick up all your equipment, and then they come back and they're like, well, this was scratched, and this was scratched, and this has a dead battery, and by the time you actually get the check, you're sitting there like, was it even worth it? So I'll be honest, given that experience and the current state of the technology as I've seen it, I'm not up for it. If you tell me as a board you want me to go with one of the bigger numbers, by all means, I'll do so. But we're actually gonna make the recommendation to go for GER's flat rate. So what that means is they will pick it up, they will take it, they will hand me a check for $17,000 for the district, and I can kind of wash my hands of it. So I will tell you, A-Team was who we actually went with last year. We had a bit more equipment, their quote came in around 36. And I think when they actually cut us a check, it was like 13,008. and it was all said and done, Dell's looking at me because we always joked about that one. So they'll come back and give me a nice report and say, this was the serial number, and it's usually like scratch, dent, crack, dead battery, blah, 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 blah.
So do
So,
I understand it because the terms of these bids differ, we don't have to take low bid?
correct. So as you can see, we have each one as max payout. That's what their response is. If it's all in perfect, almost brand new condition, we're gonna give you that kind of money. I don't know if you've seen what students do to computers. We try our best to get them back up and running, but they just, sometimes they're missing a bezel or, usually a missing key drops it from an A to a C, which is like less than half the original amount, so. But yeah, so that would be my recommendation, but I'm also open if you want me to pursue any of the other ones, so they're all there for your review.
Any questions? This does not require a vote.
Nope. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Well, we got through that rather quickly, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
The board agenda for next week is posted for your review. At this point, is there anyone in the public that would like to address the board on any issue? Are there any board initiatives board members would like to bring up? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session for legal and personnel issues.
Motion to adjourn to executive session.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? If not, we are